My next guest is Dr. Christopher Culver. He is a proud product of Oklahoma education and has served educational communities since 2013 as a classroom teacher, secondary principal, and most recently as a cabinet level administrator. Dr. Culver is a product of a divorced family and split time between Tulsa and Wyandotte, Oklahoma, and Fayetteville, North Carolina during his childhood. Currently, he serves as a consultant with expertise in kindness, culture, and understanding, Gen Z and Gen A, as an adjunct professor at Oklahoma City University, teaching future leaders and teachers. He is well known for his high energy, passionate, engaging, and motivational professional development. Participants call him engaging, charismatic, dynamic, and enthusiastic. He has his pulse on today's generation, and he's focused on spreading kindness through educating about Gen Z and A. Well, welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Thank you so much. I'm truly, genuinely rooted in gratitude to be here and cannot thank you enough for this experience and opportunity.
Well, it's my pleasure to have you on. And when we did the pre-chat, what I found was a fun fact is that we both graduated from the same high school in Tulsa.
That's right. After we chatted on that call, I told my partner, I was like, you won't believe this. I was like, we graduated same similar years, just a couple of years apart. I said, but from the same high school. I said, which is so cool. And that connection to Tulsa.
Yeah. So, that gets us to talking a little bit about just your experience during the podcast and working with English language proficiency assessment and Gen A and Gen Z. But we'll start off with a question I ask everybody. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
Oof. This is a hard one. So probably has some trauma still tied to it. So I appreciate you asking that. I'll take you back to my first year as an assistant principal. I had joined a campus with a campus leader. We did not see eye to eye. I did not understand how the culture was so destructive for students and staff alike. It actually is what triggered me to earn my EDD, researching school culture, the collective impact on motivation and teacher retention. But I'll tell you, it was the darkest point of my life. I didn't know how I was going to get out. I saw no hope in anything. I didn't have faith in the system. I didn't have faith in people, didn't have faith in myself. And I was at an all-time low to the point that I had to call the employee helpline and do the 6-3 therapy sessions because my supervisor and that culture was so destructive to my mental health that I didn't know what was going on. But to be honest with you, I got out of the trenches because of the therapy. But in addition, I found kindness. And that is my own personal journey with kindness. Being kind to myself, being kind to others, and understanding the power of our mindset and gratitude. I'm not saying that it was an easy way out of the trenches, but I will tell you that it was a multi-year journey to help me understand about energy and what we put out into the world. And I eventually left that space and had opportunities to flourish in other spaces for which I'm grateful. But at the time, I didn't understand what was happening, but I look back, and had I not had that experience, I don't know that I would have earned my doctorate. I don't know that I would have had a different leadership approach. I don't know that I would have found kindness the way it's changed my life. And so, although that was a really, really turbulent time in my life, I am incredibly grateful, rooted in gratitude for the experiences and the opportunity that it taught me on the backside.
Yeah, no, and that's really interesting. Like that's kind of similar to a few other guests I've had in terms of working for a principal who, might have led a school and they're a toxic culture. I've experienced that myself. And, the fact that you wouldn't have gotten your doctorate, right? You wouldn't have done what you're doing now and researching kindness and helping schools learn about empathy and all that had you not experienced this difficult time. And I think just calling that EAP lie, that is not like anything to be ashamed about. I think there's a lot of teachers out there and administrators that like shy away from getting any mental health support. But having been in those type of trenches myself, like I really know that like whether it is through a therapist who works with general just social work, or even in Colorado, we have some therapists that work especially with educators. It's so important to be able to vent, right? I mean, there's some educators do vent to others in the building, but at some point that just adds to this toxicity, right?
So that's it. And it's hard too, because as an administrator, right? Like you don't want to, you don't want to tell the teachers the issue, but then you don't want to tell your colleagues as well. And you definitely didn't want to tell the principal because it was not a safe space. So it was that vulnerability. But I will be honest, I don't know that I started talking about calling EAP until the last couple of years because I was still in shame and embarrassment of my life getting to that point that I let it spiral out of control. But really, it was all a learning opportunity. So I appreciate you highlighting the power of calling EAP and how some administrators and teachers are scared to do it. And I just lean into it. I'm like, I had to, and it changed my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. So I wanted to start off with, looking at your website, and I'll include all the links in the show notes. You have a lot of resources on character development. You have infographics that staff can use. They're on empathy, kindness, etc. And I just wanted to kind of start off with what got you interested in serving schools in this way. And when you go into schools to talk about these topics, where do you start?
I appreciate that question. So, as I shared, I earned my ADD researching school culture, the collective impact on teacher retention. And what I found was it came down to these characteristics. Teachers are looking for relationships, trust, empowerment, autonomy, recognition, and communication. And in the spring of 2023, I had the opportunity to serve at Oklahoma City University
Mhm.
as an adjunct professor, working with all of the new teachers who were going into the field during their student teaching in the course called Human Development. And I hadn't been in the classroom for, gosh, probably 10 or 11 years since I tackled that journey. And here I go with my toolbox into that space, what I thought was going to work. And I'll tell you what, I was in for a rude awakening on day
Mhm.
one. And it wasn't the students, it was me. I had to reflect and figure out how to be more intentional. And what I realized is through the research is the students want the same thing. They want relationships, trust, empowerment, autonomy, recognition, and communication. And so that really started my journey into the research of both. And what I found is it really takes a sense of belonging, feeling seen, heard, valued, and respected. And that starts with kindness and empathy. And so I work with schools on understanding today's learners, making sure that
Mhm.
we teach them at high levels, and it all starts with understanding them. And I do that through a lens of kindness and empathy because the research is clear. There's a decline on empathy for students since 2018, and there's even a more so decline since 2024. There was a study done in Asia just this
Mhm.
last that talks about how if you don't demonstrate virtual empathy, then you won't be able to apply those same characteristics and attributes to your own life to demonstrate empathy in real world. And so as I educate about today's learners and help teachers and administrators and nonprofits and whatever entity it may be, understand them, I do it through a lens of kindness and empathy for that reason. There's a decline of it, and I want to make sure that it's rooted in compassion and understanding so everyone feels seen, heard, valued, and respected.
Mhm. Mhm. And if you're going into a school that maybe is similar to where you worked in your trench story that has a lot of negativity among staff and a toxic culture, and the students, they're kind of getting the brunt of this, like frustrated teachers, right? And there is a maybe it's a district push or initiative or a mandate even put on the school to kind of bring the culture, turn the culture around, and instill a culture of empathy and kindness. Do you have any experience working as kind of consultant in schools like that? And where would that would you work with small groups of staff? Kind of how would you get started? Because I know there's a lot of schools out there that would need a culture shift, but learning about these things would be the first place to start.
Absolutely. So I appreciate the question, and I go back to your small group
Mm-hmm.
suggestion. That's very much it. We have to work on our own internal mindsets as we approach this generation. And so one of the first activities out of the gate of the workshop that I lead is if you were to choose a tool from your toolbox to create the most perfect culture, which would it be? And you have four choices: a saw, a screwdriver, pliers, and a hammer. And
Mm-hmm.
what we see is individuals, we'll do a four-corner activity and we discuss and we talk about it. And what we'll see is different individuals will go to different parts of the corner. And then what I do is I say that these are the key characteristics of you based on the tool you selected. And then we talk about how they work as a staff to build cohesion and culture, no matter what their tool may be, because we can't have all hammers, we can't have all saws, we can't have all pliers, we can't have all screwdrivers. It takes all of us collectively to build that for that perfect culture. And so we start in our own experiences and examining backwards on our own unconscious bias and our own understanding of today's students and our own mindsets. And then we begin the path forward to understand that we as adults bring strengths to the space, our students bring strengths to the space, and it's just making sure we have that paradigm or that mindset shift to ensure that we can lead, teach, and work in kindness and empathy. And it's really not a weakness. It's actually an asset so people can understand that they are part of the school community, the classroom community, and that they can have a trusted relationship with someone in this space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a key. Like you talk about the trusted relationship, really knowing that each student has a trusted adult or two or three, right? And being able to follow through with that student. If that student isn't in your class, if you're a counselor, if you're working outside of a classroom, supporting students in another way, making sure that that kind of ties in full circle, that you're really leaning into that piece with those students. So um, let's talk a little bit about veteran teachers. I would consider myself one of those people kind of on the opposite end, right? And far away from the Gen Alpha. I mean, I have kids that are Gen Z and Gen Alpha, right? But like, and I work with a lot of kids that age, but just in terms of like teachers that like have been in the field for 20 plus years and some of these needs, there's a lot of teachers, like you said, kind of 2016, 2020 and beyond, there's been a lot of these shifts in behaviors, right? And just, I mean, a lot of it has to do with social media, but there's also just kind of like um, a shift in maybe willingness, maybe to do assignments, or we're also so sometimes attributing this to parents and the helicopter parents sometimes, but there's also the opposite end, right? There's parents that make excuses for their kids, and then the kids feel very, there's learned helplessness, right? So um, yeah, you talk a lot about these reaching these kids from these generations. So talk to me a little bit about where you would start when we're working with a multi-generational staff.
Well, I think the first part is we have to understand that it takes community. Like we have to be a
Yeah,
community in our classrooms and our schools. And so it starts, I'll be vulnerable. My first year teaching was a hot mess express, right? I didn't know
yeah,
what I was doing, but just surviving. And so grateful to have experienced it. And when we made it on the other side. But my second year, I was more intentional. And I'll tell you
yeah.
that the second year and through the end, I started when I was working on my classroom syllabus, I would start using student voice and choice, asking around expectations and norms for our classroom environment. And the rationale behind that is because I knew that when the crap hits the fan, which we know at some point it's
Yeah.
going, we have those collective norms and expectations around what's going to happen in that classroom. So that was one of the first things that I encourage staff to do now is elevating voice and choice. But
Yeah.
more than today's learners are kinesthetic visual learners. And so what I always say, if you're a worksheet wizard, I'm so grateful for those worksheets that you've printed off, but they need that learning experience where they're collaborating with individuals and they're doing the heavy lifting because
Mhm.
that way they're building competence and confidence in themselves. And I get it. That's hard for some veteran teachers who want control of the space, but it's all about making sure we have expectations and
Mhm.
we're providing those guardrails and we're providing those experiences where students can be engaged. That will lessen behaviors and lessen time on technology. As you shared, behaviors are off the charts, and that's manifesting because of social media and
Yeah.
technology. A lot of it's rooted in looking for affirmation and validation with likes, comments, and shares. Don't know how to bring those same communication skills or lack thereof, if you will, into the real world. And so I know it's another thing, but when we create those collaborative experiences for students, we're creating that opportunity to learn how to connect with individuals, to create friendships, to create relationships, to create partnerships, whatever it may be. And so that is foundational, and not only moving away from that compliance-based measure of completing the
Mhm.
work, but making sure that we're encouraging problem solving and critical thinking deeply rooted in empathy, which is so important for today's learners. And so I don't think that's unique to veteran teachers or new teachers. I think that's unique to all teachers, of just changing our mindset from compliance-based work, if you will, of turning things in, but really cultivating that experience. That takes more time of planning, right? It can't be a parking lot plan you do on Monday morning or on Tuesday morning, whatever day of the week it is. It's going to be some intentionality behind it. But those experiences that we create are what students remember, and those are the ones that they're most likely to be more engaged in.
Mhm. Mhm. You gave me an example from when you taught language arts. You said you taught Shakespeare, but you also leaned into the Gen A slang. Give me a little bit of an example of how you did that.
Yeah, so I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago, but on MTV, the Yo Mama rap battle was a really big deal.
Mhm.
It was really popular on a lot of social media platforms. And so I'm
Mhm.
probably going to be blasphemous when I say this, but I was like probably the only English teacher out there that did not enjoy teaching Shakespeare. And so ways in which I could lean into that was I leveraged Shakespearean slang through a Yo Mama rap battle, and students had a
Mhm.
competition in the classroom to bring learning to life, to build connections with my content and their context. And so the winner got a paper plate, spray paint gold with a 1 on and some string. And then now I use that same activity working in workshops so teachers can lean into the Gen Z and Gen A slang. I think I've seen a lot of posts on social media saying these words are banned. And I'll tell you, if we have that perspective, then students don't feel seen, heard, valued, and respected. They're like less likely to feel connected and to trust. But if we lean into it and have fun with the slang and try to connect with them, they think it's entertaining. They think it's fun. I think we build trust and relationships. Now, I want to push here, making sure that the slang that they're using and we're using is appropriate. I know sometimes students can use slang that's not appropriate, or you call us bruh or bro. Those things are not appropriate. But I think leaning into Skibbity Ohio Riz or things of that nature would be entertaining and would foster that trusting relationship with students. So we do that in the workshop. But it's all stemmed back from those years in the classroom when I did that with Shakespeare with my students, and they loved it. That was an experience they continue to talk about today after I've not had them for years and years. And so that's what I talk about. I mean, that is the importance of an experience, an engaging experience for students.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the English language proficiency assessment. You helped raise scores, and these were students that were duly identified, so special ed and multilingual learners. And this was done from an F to a B in 1 academic year. I'm really interested, with my background in multilingual learners, how you were able to achieve this and some of the strategies that you used.
Absolutely. So one of the things I unpacked in my role as an executive team member of Superintendent's Cabinet was looking at some of the data aligned to our multilingual learners. That was predominantly our population. And I can tell you, looking at historical data, there was a lack of growth. And I knew that we needed to do something in order to see any kind of growth district-wide in our report card. And so we targeted interventions, as you shared, to our ELPA progress as scored by the Oklahoma State Department of Education. And so we leveraged EduSkills, which is a home language survey, multilingual learners compliance services. They helped us with all of our home language survey capture, which increased our funding by significant dollars. So that allowed us to use some additional funding to provide professional development. And so we had on-site professional development from Dr. Kelly Forbes, and he worked alongside our teachers and our administrators, helping them understand sheltered instruction observation protocol, SIOP, also looking at ways in which we can have sheltered instruction practices and strategies in our classrooms. But so importantly, our teachers were all trained in WIDA. What we realized is that our teachers were trained to take the OSTP. Every teacher in our district was trained to provide services to administer the Oklahoma State test for the end of the year assessment, but not all of them were trained in WIDA. And what that did was open their eyes to the incredible rigor that is on WIDA and how some of our some of our native English speakers may not have been able to pass that assessment. And so once we had that understanding and we reapproached the way we taught in the classroom to make sure we had speaking, reading, listening, and writing every single day. And then we met with students who took the WIDA assessment individually, one-on-one, prior to them taking the assessment to set goals and measurables to understand the assessment. And so we, as you shared, went from an F to a B as a district in 1 academic year, and our duly identified students went from an F to an A. And so it was being very intentional with our resources, very intentional with our professional development and training, and using data and assessments to drive the conversation that leveraged that result and that we were recognized.
Yeah, and I see that as something that, like here in Colorado, I mean, there's a lot of teachers when they are teaching or doing the assessment with multilingual learners, they get the WIDA training, right? But not everybody knows how to, embed some of these strategies into their classroom teaching, pushing the kids forward. Like you said, there are a lot of these prompts on the speaking and the writing for students that are, long-term language learners mostly, but they are pretty rigorous, and some native English speakers wouldn't be able to necessarily do well on them. So in terms of, besides the training for the teachers, what could you suggest to districts where a lot of the students who are identified as MLLs are remaining stagnant from year to year and not moving up or being exited from the program?
I think one of the biggest pieces is assessing in the native language to identify, is it a cognitive is it a cognitive delay, or is it a language acquisition issue? times you'll see that it's language acquisition. And so how do we provide that support for training for teachers and classrooms? I think we have to see languages and cultures as an asset and lean into translanguaging. I've seen it happen in the college class where I've seen students not understand the word in English, but are able to pull that cognate from Spanish and then say, oh, this is the connection, right? So then in that moment, I'm blown away saying, wow, I just watched this happen. This kid didn't know it in English, but could recall it from Spanish, then gave them the understanding in English. And so when we do that in our pre-K through 12 classrooms or any learning space, that really helps students feel seen, heard, valued, and respected, to feel trusted by an adult or by peers, to build that relationship. But it also helps them lean into their cultural heritage and their language to say, hey, I can draw from my experiences. I can draw from my native heritage and my language to help me grow and to be better, right? And so I really do believe that their first language, I'm so sorry, being bilingual is a superpower. And so I think we have to lean into seeing their asset and language as a lean into that being an asset for them in the learning space.
Yeah, and like you said, it's that really showing them what they can do with the bilingualism, being able to be bilingual, biliterate in both languages. I also think, working, so I didn't mention on your bio, but you have been, so right now you're past president of the Oklahoma Association for Bilingual Education. And one of the things we have in common, I am currently the president of the Colorado Congress for Language Teaching. So just making kind of, when we think of the state level and we're thinking about, heritage language, right? And really tying in, because that's also a piece of world language teaching. And we're looking at, expanding heritage language options, especially when we have districts with high numbers of students who are identified as, having English as a second language. How would we be able to advocate more at the district or state level for having more heritage language classes? Because I think the funding is often a piece, but it's also maybe finding staff as well.
Yeah, so there's two parts there. You're absolutely right, funding and staff. With the Awabe Association, the previous president, Dr. Taylor Tribble, worked hard and alongside our state officials to bring the seal of biliteracy to Oklahoma. And so now Awabe champions that work statewide with districts, helping them with supporting the recognition piece of the seal of biliteracy. Some of our districts are graduating students in double and triple digits with seal of biliteracy, which is just mesmerizing and so inspiring as well. As you shared, the funding piece is huge. We in our district where I served recognized that we would benefit from dual language programs. And so we launched 2 dual language programs in our district to support the students and the families. And I'll tell you that families vulnerably shared, it was the first time they felt seen, heard by the district. And they had tears in their eyes as they shared that with us. We worked with our State Department of Education and our memorandums of understanding with other countries to bring in teachers from outside the United States with that native language, because staffing here in the United States, as you shared, is tough. And so is funding. There's not additional funding to launch dual language programs. There's not incentives around that. We do get Title III funds from the federal government. In Oklahoma, we get bilingual funds into our general account. And so we can pull from that, but just setting aside saying, hey, you're gonna do something innovative with dual language programs, there's not that. And so I think the more awareness we bring to the benefits of programming in their native language and in dual language programming to the state and district officials, it helps show that. But I was reading research just 2 weeks ago that talks about how this isn't beneficial for just native speakers of other languages. This is beneficial for all students because of the rigor and the challenge that is embedded with learning additional language. It will actually help today's learners feel more engaged, have more autonomy, more critical thinking, more problem solving, which are all foundational for today's generation. And so I would love to see a push for not only creating more dual language and creative pathways of that way to engage today's learners, to create more opportunities, but also to help them have more access to a global world. And so I just think there's so much benefit if we can have that conversation, no matter at what level we serve, to ensure that all of those who serve us at an elected capacity or those above us have an understanding as to the benefits, not just academically, but cognitively and developmentally as well.
Yeah, it's so important to remember. And I think ever since I've been in the field of world language in the early 2000s, like that's something that, we've been promoting, like these benefits and everything. And I think this is like, we all know this, we who are in that field, right? But it's like really getting that point across the state level for the powers that be, right? And I think it's great when you're able to use some title funds for building, dual language schools. I think in several districts in the Denver area, they should have more dual language schools. But there, there's a few, but there's not enough, right? So I think really as we think about the future, we think about the needs of the Gen Z and Gen A kids, right? It's really building up their cognitive abilities, and whether it be immersion, whether it be dual language, helping kids be immersed in language, right? And be bi or trilingual. Some of the students that I had in French who were the best students were those who already spoke a second language, right? So it always helps. Like, it is a superpower. So yeah, thanks for your thoughts on that. I wanted to ask a little bit about some of your upcoming speaking engagements or keynotes that you might have planned for the beginning of 2025 or in the spring or summer, if you have anything on your calendar yet.
Absolutely. So I will be doing some work locally here in Oklahoma in January and February. I'm headed to NCMLE in North Carolina as a featured speaker in March. I am a keynote speaker here for Oklahoma School Readiness in April, talking about kindness and empathy to adults around. And I'll be in Nuts and Bolts here in Oklahoma in June as well. There's other events that are in negotiations and keynoting talks that I'm in, but nothing solidified yet. Those are the ones that are on the calendar and ready to go. But as always, I share what's going on my calendar through social media and my website, and I love connecting with individuals and sharing stories, but most importantly, spreading kindness and love, hope, joy, and optimism, no matter where I am with whom I'm connecting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You also have a blog, and I wanted, so the title is The Kind Voice. Do you have a recent blog post maybe that you've written in the past week or two that you'd like to talk a little bit about? And I can put the link in the show notes.
Absolutely. So I just wrote a blog not too long ago about the power of kindness in regards to the circle of courage and a compassionate school model. I started the Kind Voice because in our state, in Oklahoma, there's a lot of negative rhetoric around education and teachers. And I know that's not unique to our state. I'm just pulling from my own personal experience. And so I believe, and I'm rooted in this philosophy, that if you can't find the light, then be the light. And so I decided to launch the Kind Voice to share positive things that are happening in education, no matter where they are. And so I've had a lot of contributions from individuals who have vulnerably shared their story or their growth or what's happened through leadership, through teaching, through connecting with students. And so in this last vlog, I share about the circle of courage, which talks about belonging, gratitude, making sure that we all feel seen, heard, valued, and respected, and what that does for students and why it's important. But then I also parallel that with a compassionate school model that talks about the transformational impact of relationships. Both models are rooted in research. And so then I tie that in with my 5+1, which talks about the relationships, trust, empowerment, autonomy, recognition, and then that communication piece. And I explain all of that because it's so important in order to connect and understand and to reach and teach today's learners. It's making sure we have that foundational understanding of how to connect with them. And so that blog, I unpack ways in which we can do that, give strategies, insights, and activities that anyone can use no matter what space it may be. And if anyone wants to be a blogger, I'm always welcome guest bloggers and looking for guest bloggers as well, who can share their stories and their insights on kindness, empathy, love, joy, hope, and optimism.
Great, great. I'll make sure I put a link to that information in the show notes. And if anybody would like to reach out to you, share their experience in working with students on these topics. Well, we've had a great conversation today, just hitting the surface of some of the work that you do around empathy, kindness, some of your experience, bringing up test scores for multilingual learners, and your work with the Gen Z and Gen A population. Out of everything we've talked about today, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
Treat others the way you'd want to be treated. Make sure you're walking a life of kindness and assuming positive intent. We don't know what's happened to someone before they come into our presence, and we don't know what's going to happen when they leave us. All we can know is that the experience and opportunity we have before us with them is for a reason, and it's teaching us something, or we're teaching them something. So make sure you're kind to yourself and kind to others, and treat others the way you'd want to be treated.
Great. Well, where can people connect with you and find you online?
I love connecting with people, and I'm on all social media platforms. My handle is at Dr. Chris Culver on all of the social media platforms. And then my website is www.orangesparrow.org. And there's all my contact information, as you alluded to, the blog, videos, testimonials, resources, graphics, all kinds of things that can be pulled and used in any collective space.
Great. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the Out of the Trenches podcast today, and help people reach out to you, have you come in and train the staff on kindness and working with Gen Z and Gen A. Have a good rest of your day.
Same to you. Thank you so much.